Hey, it's Matt Moscona. You found it. It's AFR LSU, your home for daily content on your favorite team, Fighting Tigers of LSU. And we're proud to be presented by BetUS, where this football season, get a 150% bonus on your first deposit and a 125% bonus on your next two deposits up to $2,000. Be sure to use the promo code YouTube150. Now, enjoy the video. Tigers and Tide, but it'll look a lot different. No Nick Saban on the sideline for the first time since 2007. Our buddy Pat Smith from WJOX there in Birmingham. He's on Twitter at Pat Smith Radio. Y'all give him a follow. Pat, great to chat as always, man. How are you?
Matt, I'm doing so well. Now, technically, Nick will probably be on the sideline. He just won't have headsets on.
Are they going to let him on the sideline, or is he going to be up in a suite? I heard he was going to be in a suite.
He probably will be in a suite, and now that there's going to be a Tiger on the sideline, probably will not be down there.
Yeah. Old Omar the Tiger is going to be hanging out on the sideline for a little bit. Anyway, what weird thing. But anyway, hey, I'm curious. We've obviously had the Saban conversation here a ton. I mean, I've had it since literally the day he retired. But specifically for this week, Pat, how big of a deal is that, Nick not being there for Bama for the first time since 2007?
Well, it's big in the respect that they've already lost 2 football games. I mean, that's why it's a big story. I mean, if Kalen DeBoer had that thing continue to roll after the Georgia win, and then you go to Nashville and you throw up on yourself, then it becomes a problem. That's when people start, manipulating the idea of what Kalen DeBoer is not wearing on the sideline has anything to do with their rush defense or them not being able to stop teams on third down. So, yeah, I mean, it comes up not as much as many people probably think it does in regards to, man, I wish Nick Saban was back, things of that nature. But as far as this game goes, they know it's an elimination game. People, they understand, and I'll give you credit, Matt. I mean, we had you on our show back in spring ball, and you kind of laid out the season, and you told us that you fully anticipated that the game between LSU and Bama there in Baton Rouge in November was going to be an elimination game for the college football playoff. And my friend, you are Nostradamus when it comes to football, because here we are. That's exactly what this game is on Saturday night.
Strikes and gutters, man. You get something right. Everybody's going to remind you about the 10 things that you get wrong. But what is can you tell a material difference watching like every snap of this team with what they were and what they are? Like where would you notice a difference?
Well, in my opinion, like before the season started, and I'm sure Cole Kublik has shared this with you as well. He's been at practice. I have people that's at practice that give me intel, things of that nature. They said at practice, outside of obviously music blaring, doing things that the young kids like to have now at practices, for the most part, I mean, Kalen DeBoer, he's a fiery coach at practice. I mean, there's no difference. He's not wearing a straw hat like Nick Saban did, but they tell me that there's no difference there. But, the last couple of years, Matt, and you could kind of see some cracks in this Alabama foundation, because there were certain games that they just did not look. I mean, you had dumb penalties. You had all these unforced errors that just was not part of the Alabama DNA for many years under Nick Saban. And the last couple of years before he retired, those things started bubbling up. And it was very difficult for Nick to kind of get a grasp and try to get the attention of these players to kind of firm things up. Well, that's kind of bled over to Kalen DeBoer. The number of penalties that you have, the stupid penalties you had, especially against Tennessee and Vanderbilt, came back to haunt them. That's the areas of the football team that has kind of bled over from Nick Saban. So the biggest difference probably you haven't seen in about 5 or 6 years, because that was really the last time that Alabama was playing the Nick Saban-like offense and defense that we so got accustomed to.
We'll get right back to the video. Of course, it's LSU Bama week here. We're talking about it on AFR LSU, and thrilled to have our partners at BetUS along for the ride. You want to bet on the Tigers and the Tide this weekend? The best place to do it is at BetUS. Remember, get a 150% bonus on your first deposit and 125% on your next two deposits up to $2,000. If you're going to be betting on the Tigers and the Tide, make sure you take advantage of this great offer. Use the promo code YouTube150. Let's show you how it works. We'll make our bet. You go to BetUS, super easy. We're going to hit the drop down here on football on the left side. We'll find the college football lines. We know LSU and Bama is a night game, so we're going to scroll all the way into the evening window. We'll find the Tigers and the Tide, and there it is right there. LSU somehow catching 3 at home. You kidding me? I get LSU at night in Tiger Stadium. You're going to give me points. You better believe I'm taking all of them. So you make your selection. Come up here. How much do we want to risk? Let's go big. That's how confident I am. $100 on the Tigers. Place my bet. It'll ask me to confirm. Tap right there. Here's my confirmation slip, and we are locked in. LSU +3 against Alabama Saturday night in Tiger Stadium. It's that easy at BetUS. Remember, a 150% deposit on your first, 150% bonus on your first deposit, 125% on your next 2 deposits, up to $2,000. Use the code YouTube150. Now, enjoy the video. Let's focus on the defensive side. Pat Smith's our guest, WJOX there in Birmingham, on Twitter at Pat Smith Radio. Y'all give him a follow. I've talked a lot this week about the run defense. Odd to say this, Pat. Statistically, Alabama will be the worst run defense LSU will have played this year. What's going on there that has caused Alabama to maybe struggle at times this year against the run?
Well, one thing's for sure. Going into the season, coming out of fall camp, the biggest worry was going to be the secondary. And all of a sudden you look up, and Alabama's number 2 in the SEC with 11 interceptions. I mean, they have been on fire the last few games, defensively speaking, from the secondary standpoint. But the running attack, teams have been able to run between the tackles, and that's always been an area that Alabama's been able to stop. You know, is this going to be the rush defense that you had against Georgia? Georgia had 80 yards rushing, and you saw the outcome of the game. But then you go to Tennessee, you give up over 200. You give up 160-something to Vanderbilt, another 130 to South Carolina. You know, that's the one thing that's really freaked people out down here, is because even when Kirby was the defensive coordinator, then obviously, you know, Nick ran through a bunch of DCs, but you knew it was Nick's defense. They could stop the run. You might have problems on the back end, but for the most part, they just don't have those playmakers. I mean, the number one guy in the trenches is LT Overton, who is a transfer portal guy. You know, he came from Texas A&M. And the recruiting gurus in our state will tell you that that is one area, even the last couple of years under Nick Saban, they were not able to recruit at the level that they wanted to. And not to mention the fact when you lose a guy like Dallas Turner and obviously Anderson, who's now with the Texans, you lose those guys. Those are generational type talent, but they just have not been able to fill those holes for those really big playmakers, those disruptors on the defensive front.
Do you think on the back end they can hang with LSU's receivers and Nussmeier and all those guys slinging it around? Because LSU struggled to run it, but the one thing they've done really well this year is throw it.
That's going to be tough. And the reason why is we go back just a couple of years ago when Bryce Young was the quarterback at Alabama. I mean, look who ultimately did Alabama in. It was Taylor. And that's, I've heard his name mentioned a lot this week from people in Tuscaloosa. That is the person, The other wideouts are a huge concern for Alabama, but it's that tight end position. Are the linebackers going to be able to play good enough and to be able to stop that? So they believe that they got a good plan coming into the game on Saturday night. Now, listen, it goes without saying that if you can disrupt Garrett Nussmeier, what you saw, obviously, the second half against Texas A&M, then they like their chances better. But if LSU finds a running game and you can't stop them or get off the field on third down, this is going to be a very long night for Alabama.
Pat, I think we are in for an offensive football game. I think both defenses are going to struggle a bit. So let's flip it, and I want to ask you about Jalen Milroe. I asked Brian Kelly earlier this week what differences he's noticed in what Tommy Rees asked Jalen Milroe to do a year ago and what Kalen DeBoer is asking Jalen Milroe to do now. When you watch Milroe year to year, what do you see as far as a progression as a player?
Well, I see this. I see a guy that is really torn on what he wants to be as a quarterback. Does he want to be a dual threat? For a long time last year, until the LSU game when he went off for what he did numbers-wise, he wanted to be a pocket passer. And just almost like Jalen Hurts was in Tuscaloosa. I mean, that was always the rub. You know, Jalen, towards the back end of his Alabama career, he wanted to, I'm talking about Hurts,
Sure.
He wanted to be a pocket passer, whereas, you know, Nick knew that, you know what, I just don't want to give it all in and let him, you know, be a dual threat and run the ball and throw it. Well, Jalen Milroe's been kind of the same way. He's kind of been like, you know what, I don't want to do all that running, to the point to where a couple weeks ago, you had people calling our radio station going, hey, Milroe's got to be hurt. Like, since the Georgia game, he just looks different. He's just not running with authority. I mean, he's not getting to the edge. He's not doing those type things. So it's a very long answer to your question, Matt. But for me, I'm seeing a quarterback that is still kind of torn. And I think Nick Sheridan, who's the offensive coordinator at Alabama, he's also torn what you want to do. He's thrown 3 touchdown passes and 5 interceptions in the last 4 games and only has 100 yards rushing. For Alabama to be successful Saturday night, he has got to have the type of game that he had against Georgia. If not, the Bama run game has been a problem with the other 2 guys. It might be just a tough night for Bama to try to move the ball that way. It would have to be with his arm.
Pat, where do you see look, there's playmakers still in the – everybody's talking about Ryan Williams, and Milroe's obviously very capable, and Jalen Miller. I mean, there's athletes there. Where is there a weakness on Alabama's offense?
To me, it's crazy for me to say this, Matt, but it's the quarterback. And it goes back to what I just said a few moments ago in regards to him trying to figure out what he wants to be and what this offense needs him to be. I mean, I've had people tell me that obviously the quarterback that's on that in that quarterback room is Austin Mack. He is the transfer from Washington. He's a true freshman. He's a guy that committed to Washington, signed at Washington, and then he ultimately followed to Tuscaloosa. He's still a couple years away, but that's the kind of offense that I think that they want to run. I think Jalen Milroe right now, they're really struggling to try to figure out what he wants to do. And I know it's crazy for me to say that's kind of the weakness there, because until you decide you're all in on one way or another and not just play every other week, it's kind of helter-skelter. I think that's the problem with this offense right now. It's very disjointed. Do you want to run it? Do you want to be a pocket passer? It hasn't been since the Georgia game that they've had a good mix of both to be able to do that.
Pat Smith is our guest, WJOX in Birmingham. Hey, Pat, what do you think is – I mean, I don't know. I think this will be a close game. I mean, it should be. You got pretty evenly matched teams. What do you think ultimately tilts the balance one way or another in this game?
I think it'll be third downs. I really do. Bama has had a huge problem this year, Matt, just huge problem getting off the field when they needed to get off the field. And seeing what Nussmeier did against Ole Miss and against Pete Golden, that defense, that scares the heck out of Alabama, because they just have not been able to get off the field on third down when it really mattered. Yeah, they shut out Tennessee in the first half, just like everybody else has lately there against the Vols. But in the second half, when they had to have those third down stops, they just did not get it. And that comes back to, if it's a short third down situation, can LSU have a running game to run between the tackles that teams have had success? And if Nussmeier gets hot, like he did on those final drives and then overtime against Ole Miss, then all of a sudden that is going to be very problematic for Alabama.
Hey, if LSU wins and Bama gets hung a third loss, how do you think, last thing, how do you think that is received, the temperature there around the program?
People will lose their mind. Absolutely. I mean, listen, the type of things that was being discussed after the Vanderbilt loss and then the Tennessee loss, it was ridiculous. I mean, it took me back to the days of Dennis Franchione and Mike Shula, before Nick Saban got there. Just ridiculous stuff, like what the coach is wearing, what they're playing, the music they're playing at practice.
That shirt was a little small, Pat. That shirt was a little small.
I mean, let me say something. I mean, it's just crazy the type of. I mean, it literally took me back to 1997 with Paul Feinbaum and listening to Alabama people on a Monday. It's just everyone forgets before Nick Saban what it was like. And a lot of these Alabama fans, the old guard, they are very concerned of going back to football team that's going to lose 3 to 4 ball games every year. Unlike the situation down at Auburn, which is an absolute what show. Yeah. But besides that, Alabama is just trying to hold on and try to get, at least in year one, to the CFP.
He is Pat Smith, WJOX there in Birmingham, at Pat Smith Radio. Y'all give him a follow there on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it now. Hey, Pat, we always appreciate the time, man. It's great to chat as always. We'll visit soon, okay?
Hey, thanks, brother. Talk soon.
Thanks so much for watching the video. Do us a favor, subscribe to the channel, smash that like button, hit the bell so you're notified when we post a new video, and remember to support BetUS, where right now you can get a 150% bonus on your first deposit and a 125% bonus on your next 2 deposits up to $2,000. Be sure to use that promo code YouTube150.